From WYPR, I'm Sheila Cast, and this is Maryland Morning. The Maryland Cyber Challenge makes a sport out of defending computer systems from attackers armed with malicious code. Teams of high school students just fought through the second round this past weekend. We'll talk to the co-director of the competition and get an update from state government on its effort to build a cybersecurity industry. Then, if cyber geeks can be cool, astronauts are beyond cool. The head of the Space Telescope Science Institute talks to Naja Ellington, a sixth grader who wrote a book about the Hubble. Plus, theater critic Jaywen Russick previews the fall season with Tom Hall. And the founder of Amplify Baltimore explains Misrepresentation, a film about media's failure to portray successful women. All that in this hour. But first, today's headlines.
The news in this case is that you're listening to the Maryland Morning Podcast. I'm producer Stephanie Hughes. Thanks for downloading us. You can listen to us live every weekday morning except Thursday on 88.1 FM in Baltimore and Frederick, 106.9 in Ocean City, and streaming at WYPR.org. Now, on with the podcast.
Thanks, Nathan. This is Maryland Morning on 88.1. I'm Sheila Cast. NPR wrapped up that last hour of Morning Edition with a piece about a malicious computer worm, Stuxnet, and the defense against that cyber weapon. Every day, hackers hit government agencies and major corporations, and cybersecurity has become a bigger concern than ever. Another example, just over a week ago, hackers got their hands on the names and contact information of hundreds of intelligence officials, including some from the NSA and the CIA, and they posted them online for all to see. Governor Martin O'Malley's administration is trying to build a cybersecurity industry here in Maryland. In January 2010, the Department of Business and Economic Development released Cyber Maryland, a detailed plan for developing an industry. Part of that plan is developing a, quote, educational pipeline. This past weekend, some local high schoolers took part in the second qualifying round of something called the Maryland Cyber Challenge. Dr. Rick Forno is the co-director of the Cyber Challenge. He also directs UMBC's graduate program in cybersecurity. He joins us by phone from his home in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the program.
Good morning.
And with us in the studio is Ursula Paudisky, Director of the Office of Business Development for Maryland's Department of Business and Economic Development. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's close.
Powitsky.
Powitsky.
Powitsky. Okay. Rick, how many people are taking part in the Cyber Challenge?
We have over 52 teams spread out throughout Maryland among our three divisions, high school, college, and professional. As far as the breakdown of the teams, they're pretty equal in terms of their composition. Figure about 12 to 15 teams per division.
And each team is 6 competitors?
Up to 6 players, yes.
Up to 6 players. So this past weekend, it was the high schoolers doing a competitive round. What were they actually doing?
The high schoolers were essentially protecting a single computer system. They would obtain a virtual computer, and it was made vulnerable ahead of time. And their job in a certain period of time was to examine this computer, find as many problems with it as they could, and fix those problems in their time frame. And they're scored by how many problems they fix.
How did it go this past weekend?
We're still tallying the scores, but there was a lot of success. I had some comments from computer club advisors saying the students were really, getting into it and having a lot of fun, which right there is encouraging. But the performance, from what I've seen, was fairly good. I mean, the high schoolers did a decent job.
Okay, some people are probably listening to this and thinking, "Are you teaching these kids how to hack?"
A lot of people think that, actually, but no. We don't want to encourage hacking. Obviously, there are skill sets of the hacker world that can be of use to the good guys, but we are focusing, particularly at the high school level, on good computer security practices, so it has a more defensive flavor to it.
Ursula, speaking of good guys, I assume that you are hoping that these kids are tomorrow's cybersecurity workers here in Maryland, but a lot of cybersecurity work in Maryland is at federal agencies, and it's expected that federal spending is going to be cut back. Does that worry you?
Not particularly. I think, for one, the federal government is going to need to continue investing in cybersecurity infrastructure. This is really kind of a new industry, and there's a certain level of capital investment and human investment that's going to need to go into this at the federal level, both military as well as federal government functions. The same is true also at the state and local level. Governments are going to need to secure their networks. Even with the pressures on the federal budget, it's anticipated that at the federal level, cybersecurity investments are going to continue at the pace that they are now, which is roughly between 10 and 15 billion a year for the next several years. I think the larger point from the standpoint of developing a cybersecurity sector industry in the state, the commercial market is, by most projections, far larger than the federal. So companies are going to have the opportunity to sell and develop products for the federal government, but even more so develop and sell products for really any range of industries that are going to need to be protected.
And is the training for commercial work and federal work much different? The training?
That's probably a better question for Dr. Forno. I would assume.
Okay, let's ask Dr. Forno. If people are getting ready to work in a commercial area or a federal area, do they essentially start out training the same way?
Yes, I think cybersecurity, whatever your discipline or career field, the skill sets are generally the same. And it's not uncommon to see people who start off in the military side of cyber transition to the civilian commercial world or vice versa. The skill sets are pretty much the same. I mean, computers are computers, whether they're in the Pentagon or at a large company.
And you run the graduate program at UMBC. Where do your students tend to go?
Our students, for the most part, are working professionals already, and many of them are in the cybersecurity, cyber operations arena, either in the government or the private sector.
But I'm curious about whether they're predominantly in one or the other.
I'd say there's a slight bias towards the government side, but not. It's fairly evenly split.
That's Dr. Rick Forno, co-director of the Maryland Cyber Challenge and the Graduate Cybersecurity Program at UMBC, here on Maryland Morning on WYPR. I'm Sheila Kast, and here in the studio with me is Ursula Pawitsky from Maryland's Department of Business and Economic Development. Ursula, it's been a year and a half since the DBED Big Report Cyber Maryland. What's been the biggest challenge moving that forward?
I think the biggest challenge is also the biggest positive, which is that there's tremendous interest in the sector, both from the private side, lots of capital investment, as well as at sort of the not-for-profit and government level, local governments, county governments, state, tech councils, universities. Everyone is getting into supporting this industry, and I think our biggest challenge has just been channeling all of this dynamic activity. And I think that we are doing that through the rubric of Cyber Maryland, which is an informal consortium of companies in this space, both small and large, universities, community colleges, state agencies, tech councils, and that activity gets expressed in a number of ways.
Now, as I understand it, part of the strategy is incentives to keep college graduates in this field working in Maryland. What kind of incentives?
I think the incentives are largely that I'm aware of are offered through funding that has been made available to community colleges and at the university level to develop cybersecurity curriculum.
Oh, I see. So it's
yes.
The incentive of good education.
Correct.
Here.
Yes.
Rick, you mentioned collegiate and professional levels to the Cyber Challenge. What's the competition like for those folks?
Well, the competition started off defensively for everybody. The second qualifying round for the college and professional competitors, which is coming up this weekend, will focus more on forensics. Essentially, the competitors will look at a computer system that has been pre-configured to as a crime scene, if you will. And their task is to identify what happened, how did it happen, and who done it, very much like a detective would. And they're scored by how well they uncover the clues.
What are they? And actually, I think I want to get back to the high schoolers in thinking about this answer. I mean, what are they learning? You said you're not teaching them to hack, the high schoolers. What are they getting out of a cyber challenge like this?
Well, we hope to accomplish a couple of things. Firstly, we want to get people excited about cybersecurity. High school students, they're the future. We want to help encourage them to pursue careers in IT and cyber careers and education in these areas, hopefully in Maryland, to kind of go along with what we're talking about. At a technical level, we're teaching these students good computer security practices. The military calls it cyber hygiene, so that they know how to protect a computer system, whether it's their own or one that they may be working on in a job somewhere. So there are a couple of different areas that we're trying to encourage the students to pursue cyber careers and good cyber housekeeping.
Ursula, the General Assembly passed a bill to create Invest Maryland, which it's essentially a venture capital fund. I tend to think of that as a way to encourage the biotech industry. But is Invest Maryland also going to be a tool for boosting the cybersecurity industry?
Absolutely. Invest Maryland is really a mechanism for raising a significant amount of capital that the state, through a couple of different avenues. One is that we will allocate some percentage of that $70 million to venture capital firms that are active in the region, and they'll make investments in companies. And then another revenue stream from the capital we're going to raise is going to go to the Maryland Venture Fund, which is a venture capital fund that we have in-house at DBED that has been around for a long time, and really be able to recapitalize it in a significant way. We are agnostic as to where that money goes. That money needs to go to promising companies. It's certainly bio is one focus, and we know a great deal about that industry. Cyber will definitely be another. And again, I think it's going to be everyone's responsibility to essentially create a pipeline of viable deals in the cyber industry, which I am fairly confident that we'll be able to do.
Rick, we're almost out of time. Very quickly, what happens at the end of Cyber Challenge? How do you win Cyber Challenge? What happens when you do?
All right. Well, we will have the finals in October 21st and 22nd at the Baltimore Convention Center. The prizes for the students will be a meaningful cash scholarship per student on the team. And again, as a way to encourage them to pursue cyber-oriented careers. So there is literally a payoff for them at the end of this.
We will check in with you on that, and Ursula, we will keep. Yes, very quickly.
I do want to make one last plug for the Cyber Challenge. There are also going to be panels and a Cyber 101 presentation.
There's a whole conference, and we'll put some information about that on our website, along with more about the Cyber Challenge and Cyber Challenge, the Maryland Report. Dr. Rick Forno is co-director of the Cyber Challenge. He also directs UMBC's graduate program in cybersecurity. Ursula Pawitsky is director of the Office of Business Development for Maryland's Department of Business and Economic Development. And I'm Sheila Stay with us. We'll have more here on Maryland Morning on WYPR.